For the second year in a row, we partnered with Lippy Taylor to conduct an influencer survey. And today, throughout this presentation, we're going to share a bunch of data and insights from that survey that will help you understand what influencers care about, how they self-identify, and what you need to know going on in the space. There is a lot to cover off on, so you guys are probably going to be taking a lot of photos and jotting down notes. But visit us at the booth, and we'll get you the full report. So pay attention to what we have today, and don't worry, we'll get you everything that you need. So again, my name is Danny Palestine. I'm the head of customer strategy. I'm currently learning about software product marketing at Julius. And it's interesting to see how my experience at an agency translates to that. Prior to Julius, I was working at an agency called 360i, where I was doing influencer marketing across a variety of different verticals in a very integrated fashion. And this is my cat, Cindy. She loves Game of Thrones and nature videos. So yeah, again, we have a lot to tackle today, a lot of really great insights and data to share. But stick around, because around the middle of this session, we're going to invite some experts from the space to talk about the study that we did and see what they have to think. So let's dive in. 75% of our respondents were women. They are large in part owning the landscape. But year over year, we saw a 4% increase of male respondents, which is really interesting. In fact, women have really been owning the space, and they made up 83% of our macro and mega influencer respondents. They've been able to escalate themselves to that higher echelon because they've been doing this longer, and they're a little bit more authoritative in the space. But we did see that men are trickling in, but they're taking on niche verticals, more like gadgets and gaming and things like pop culture. Our full-timers that responded, 20 of our women that responded, 28% of our women that replied were full-timers, compared to their male counterparts that were just at 18. So women definitely have the quantity here, but men are equally as passionate about it, maybe a little bit more. 5% of an increase of our men said that they were trying to turn being an influencer from a side gig into a full-time thing. So men are definitely trying to make their space in the influencer landscape. But again, women are really dominating the space. 4% of our respondents, our female respondents, were making $150,000 a year, whereas their male counterparts of our survey, 0% of them were at that level. But $150,000 a year, by any industry, by any company, they're professionals. They are experts in this space. They're super senior leadership. And that's why we think that women are pushing the industry to become more professional. We saw year over year, influencers said that 50% of them said that they are making more money this year than they were last year. And as their demand rises, as brands reach out to them more, the quality of their content is going up. That's why people are paying for it. They're hitting the marks that their clients are asking them to hit, and the results are fruitful. And because of this, we think that influencers are full stride doing what their clients are asking them to do, if not over-delivering because of this increase. For our professional influencers, we saw that 21% of them are working with brands 7 to 9 times a year. That's a great benchmark for you guys to look at. If you want to work with an influencer who kind of knows the ropes, you want to have a good process and a good experience with them, look for that 7 to 9 threshold, and you'll know that it'll be a little smoother sailing, and you'll know that the content will be immaculate. For context, 80% of the influencers that were professional were working with brands 7 to 10 times or more a year. They're super busy. In order for you guys to get in with those higher echelon influencers, you need to be enticing. The theme of this weekend is stories, and the way that you guys can get the best stories out of the influencers is helping them achieve their personal and professional goals. That's how you guys are going to get the in, and that's how you guys are going to get the best work out of them. We also saw that our professional influencers, 28% of them had a blog. I think that when we look at the influencer space, we think about Instagrammers and YouTubers. But blogging is a legacy platform. It's a legacy medium that has transcended the social media wave. Plus, there's a lot of longevity and SEO benefits when you work with influencers, so don't discount this medium. Additionally, our influencers reported that blogging is where they could be their most authentic and where they can be their most expressive. So again, advanced storytelling can be done on a blog. And finally, when it comes to blogging, this can be a really good platform for nano and micro influencers that are looking to cement themselves to rise from. If you guys are working with a smaller influencer and they have a blog, that might be an indication that they take this a little bit more seriously. And when it comes to nano and micro influencers that are trying to get to that rise, 22% of them said that, you know what, this is something that I want to pursue as a full-time gig. And it's great to see this because we should be looking at influencers beyond the numbers. I think that we know this already, but to put a little context about it, it's not all about the following. We should be thinking about these nano and micro influencers maybe as junior employees, people that we can nurture, and that when we give them opportunities to excel, they're going to perform for us because we have that relationship. Over time, you'll have a stable of influencers that can deliver on quality content because they know what you want if you give them the opportunity to do so. And I think something that we all care about is that at that lower level, they probably cost a little less as well. So when you can partner with them when they're still growing and you're nurturing them, brokering a deal might be a little bit more cost effective. And it's great to see that a lot of marketers are taking advantage of the micro and nano influencer space. 84% of these nanos and micros said that brands were using their content on their social channels. The space is becoming more integrated, and there's still a lot of content that can be shared that's at high quality despite having a lower space. And because brands are engaging these smaller folks more, and because influencer marketing has become more popular, we saw a 13% year-over-year increase in our nano and micro respondents. That's huge. I also think the reason for this is because 28% of our respondents are of the Gen X and Boomer generation. Social media is agnostic. Everyone is on social, and now it's a chance for other people to share their expertise and their stories on social. But for those older generations, 62% of them really just thought it was a hobby. This isn't going to be something that they take too seriously because at that age, you already had a career. Now it's just time to share your expertise and delve into social. And the perfect example about this is my mom. My mom had a great career as a professional organizer. Imagine growing up with that. And then she discovered Pinterest and discovered that this is a great way for me to share my expertise. But eventually she started sharing things like travel and food and dogs and things that she was passionate about on social. And we saw this across this space. 74% of our influencers said that they were motivated primarily by creativity. That's really exciting, especially because I think a couple years ago, we were still having a conversation about letting the reins of control go for creative, but only 18% of our respondents said that a hurdle to working with a brand was creative control. So it's nice to see that marketers are taking on this mentality that, you know what, influencers need to let their voice shine. Coming in second as a motivating factor was being able to share your passions, things that you're interested in, and being able to share it to people that you want to talk to about something that you're really passionate about. And I think as marketers, we think, I'm going to paint some pretty broad strokes. I want to work with a food influencer or a travel influencer. But the things that we did the same thing, actually. In the survey, we gave them 14 different verticals to sit in, but that wasn't enough. 10% of our respondents wrote other because they wanted to write something else in. Things like fashion over 50, environmental politics, and outdoors with kids. So when you guys are thinking about working with influencers, get specific. Find the influencer who's going to tell the right story because that's what they're passionate about. Coming in fourth place was being motivated by financial gain. On the contrary, though, let me say this, is that I think influencers, as marketers, were like, oh, they're so money hungry, they charge too much, they ask for too much, but they're not exactly motivated. It came in fourth. But on the contrary, a big barrier to entry when it came to working with brands, 62% of them said that, still finding a value exchange that was meaningful and of value of what they were doing was still a high barrier for the partnership. And I question why. And the reason why is because influencer marketing is becoming more complex. No longer is it just, here's a product, take a photo and share it. Marketers are challenging them to become more strategic. And then with that comes things like usage rights and flight strategies and anything else that has to go into the business end of it. Despite the production being the same, the intricacies of the partnership are becoming more complex, which makes it more challenging for people to find an equitable value exchange. And because marketers are changing this space and they're making it a little bit more challenging and being a little bit more complex, influencers are rising to the occasion. Across the board, influencers are on the pulse of what's happening in social. They're not just content producers anymore. They are strategists. They are people who know what's happening and are excited to do it. And because of this, they are leading the charge about what's driving social. One thing that I do want to call out here is podcasts. First of all, we have a podcast. And if you like the sound of my voice, you should go follow us. We're Julius Profiles, and a new episode actually just dropped yesterday, so check it out. But about podcasts, I think as marketers, we've been seeing a lot of, this episode is brought to you by brand, this spot is by brand. I'm waiting for the day where an influencer hosts their own podcast and is telling an authentic story about a branded experience that they had and can literally be the voice of your brand on a really dynamic platform and getting into the ears of your consumers, especially in a sound-off social environment, which we're all challenged with today. And because influencers are really stepping up their game, their time is valuable. 89% of our influencers, our mega and macro influencers, said that they want to be paid direct, not necessarily with products and things like that, or not even a combination. We did crunch some numbers for you, and those those professional influencers that are working with brands 7 to 9 times a year, you should probably start bucketing around $6,250 per engagement. If you don't have that type of money, it's okay. No budget? 16% of our nano and micro influencers still said that products and gifts and other opportunities, like behind the scenes or any exclusive access, could be fair value exchange for them. But you know what? If you don't have money, if you don't have products, what you do have is time and creativity. And what you see on the screen here is from a campaign I ran at the agency. We didn't have anything to give, but we were able to customize assets for the influencers specifically to build that one-to-one connection. And when we reached out to them, they were wildly engaged with this. And when they shared about it on social, our numbers were through the roof. And if you want to hear more about this campaign, find me at the Julius booth, and I would love to talk to you about it. But when it comes to working with influencers, 65% of them said that they prefer to work with brands direct, not with agencies. Why is this? As a former agency guy myself, this is almost alarming to me, but when I think about it, agency work is becoming more project-based, maybe not as many retainer clients that we've seen in the past. And because of this, brands are able to plan for the entire year. And when an inbound comes in from an influencer, they're more able to receive that and figure out an opportunity for them down the line. With this project-based work, influencer turnover with an agency is quite high. You work on a campaign, you have a specific amount of influencers, and then you move on to the next one, and then those influencers are in the past. And because of this constant hunt for influencer partners, agency folks move really fast and furious, and that might not be the best experience for the influencers. So what can agency people do, or generally, what can brand marketers do to increase the relationship with their influencers? First thing is take them to coffee. Get to know who they are as people. When Sally influencer is moving to Queens in 3 weeks, ask her how it went. Follow her on social, engage with her, and be her friend, because that's what we're all here to do, is to connect and build those relationships. For more advanced type of stuff that you maybe want to consider, bring them in as a consultant. These influencers are on the pulse of what your target audience is talking about and the language that they're using, and they're using it in the vernacular. Ask them what they care about. If you have a studio space, if you have equipment that you are not using, lend it out to the influencer, even if you're not working with them. And finally, ask an influencer what their plans are and make them your own. If Sally influencer wants to try every single slice of pizza in New York, and your new client is Cholula, that can be a really interesting partnership for a really long time. For more examples about how to build relationships with influencers, check out our first episode of our podcast where we had our clients over at Social Chain talking about just this and how to build those one-to-one relationships through the art of personalization. There's going to be many reasons why you want to build relationships with influencers. And one of them specifically is when it comes down to negotiations, and specifically when you're outlining Ftc disclosure. 84% of our influencers said that they want to adhere to the guidelines. An additional 10% said that they do whatever the brands tell them to do. Further, across the board for all of these things listed out, our influencers frown upon this activity. So I think that just because there's a few bad apples in the space and a lot of big headlines that are kind of bringing down influencer fraud, for the most part, according to our survey, influencers do want to play by the rules. One thing to call out here is about influencer pods. For those of you who don't know, influencer pods are groups of influencers that work together to inflate numbers of engagement and comments. As a marketer, I think this isn't cool. This isn't authentic. This isn't the consumer that I'm trying to reach, engage, and like, and comment. It's somebody with a backdoor deal that's doing it. However, if I put my influencer hat on, I can say, all right, this is a community of influencers that are working together to build themselves up and say, you know what? Let's bring ourselves to the next level. And I genuinely might like this content. So I kind of hear it from both sides. And that's why I think 50% of the influencers were kind of iffy on the influencer pod situation. And that's it for the data insights of the portion of this platform. Again, visit us at the booth. We'd love to get you the rest of the data. And now I'd like to call up our panelists, Sarah, Jeremy, and Jeremiah. Guys? How we doing?
All right, good.
All right, so I just talked for a while. I kind of want to pick up where we left off. We were talking about influencer fraud. So what's your take here? I mean, is it as rampant as we think? Are there thresholds that you're just like, you know what? If they do this, we are not working with them? What's your take on the whole influencer fraud situation going on right now? What's the biggest infraction?
Well, I think that anyone who works with a flat tummy tea of any sort is usually a no-go. But on the other flip side, the influencer pods thing that you were talking about, part of me likes to say, don't hate the player, hate the game. Influencers are having a hard time nowadays. They have worked and worked and worked for years to build up their audiences, and they're trying to build engagement because that's how they show value for brands.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, they have to play the game. So
do you think that's because of how organic is working these days and they're just not getting the visibility that maybe they want to?
Exactly. I have lots of friends who are influencers. Obviously, we're in the field, and these discussions that we're having with them on a daily basis, they are having a really tough time getting their content seen. And they're producing, spending hours and hours and hours, and they can't show results for brands. And as marketers, we can't show results for brands.
So I think that we kind of agree. I can see both sides of the street here. Yeah. You guys got any thoughts on this?
As influencers have become more brand friendly, the platform is.
The mic isn't working for Jeremiah?
I'll speak louder.
Okay.
And as influencers become more brand friendly, the algorithm, of course, suppresses the reach of those influencers. And I don't know how we're going to continue using organic content for brands in a way that the algorithm will favor. So what the algorithm wants us to do, what the platforms want us to do, is to pay to play.
Sure.
And so once we figure out the mix of paid dollars and influencer talent fees, we're going to be in a much better position to have a conversation with the platforms about re-upping the organic reach of influencers in non-branded environments.
Yeah.
So one thing I do is I look outside of the metrics. So it's about, and categorize them that way. So are they passionate for the brand? That's one way to use them. Are they interesting outside of the platforms? If the platforms went away tomorrow, is the media still covering them? Are people going to still want to engage with this person? And then also just looking at expertise. That's another area where we can use them, whether it's on Instagram or just at an event or at an industry conference. So it's about thinking outside of the metrics of the platform as the platform is trying to get more and more towards paid. It's about looking how do these people exist outside of those platforms.
Yeah, I love that. We always used to say content, channel, and credibility, and it's having that entire ecosystem ready to go so that you're really finding the right partners. As far as fraud goes, I want to switch gears over to more about FTC disclosure. I think that, this is something where all parties are involved, but you know what? Marketers are really focused on telling great stories, and some people think that hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored is so jarring that they kind of skip over it or find other ways to disclose. Are you guys by the book, or are you guys ready to take some leniencies when it comes to that sort of language?
I can take that. So for us, it is, let me tell you, the bane of my existence as a creative person.
Legal always is, yeah.
Yeah. And, but it's a necessary evil.
Sure.
Obviously, the field has to be regulated, so completely understand that. And so you have to find creative ways around it. And I think that, like Jeremy was saying, it's finding the right people that tell the right stories, that have the trust that they've built with their audiences. People will ignore that. And I think also for younger generations, so Gen Z and below, they are used to that.
Sure.
They've grown up on the platform. They understand hashtag ad. And what we're seeing with working with younger influencers, especially Gen Z, their audiences are encouraging the influencers they love and follow to have hashtag ad, because they say, go get that money.
Yeah.
You're getting paid. And that's what people are they're not looking up to, pro athletes as much anymore, or, actors on TV. They're looking at the influencers as their superheroes, and so they want to encourage that.
Yeah, and that, just to jump in a little bit, I think that's the rise of Patreon. That's
Right.
when they want to contribute and say hey, I believe in you, we can do this together. That's really interesting. You guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that there's, in some ways the fraud and authenticity almost are at odds, because I do think there's levels of influencers as well. So there are people who have been customers of a brand for, maybe 15, 20 years, have an expertise in the space, and so the brand wants to bring them on as a partner. That's very different than finding a beauty influencer for a one-off program. And I think that right now there's almost this umbrella definition for influencers when they're, working with brands, and I think that that's something that can be refined a bit, because there is a difference between that one-off beauty influencer and someone who's been a customer for 20 years.
I think on this panel we have a nice mixture of the PR side of the house and the kind of the paid side of the house, and thinking about how people come into the front door and through the side door, and if you've organically earned if digital talent is talking about your brand in a way that you haven't paid them for, but you kind of led them along the way with the trail of breadcrumbs, well, are we responsible for disclosing that? I say no, because there is no formal relationship. But once you brief an influencer to make a post on behalf of a client or for your brand itself, then there is, we all obviously agree on that there's a need.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Want to shift gears a little bit. We did a survey, a starking difference between nano influencer responses and those mega and macro influencers. Kind of want to hear your guys' take on the roles and responsibilities, straight up because of following and reach. Do you guys integrate them together? Do you make them engage with each other? Or what's your play here? How do you decide when you're gonna shell out for that big celebrity, or maybe that social celebrity, or really look for more of like a grassroots type of approach where you're gonna get the person that maybe has 1 to 10,000 followers? Is there like a stand in line there?
I can answer that. So for us, it really depends on what we're trying to achieve. What are our business objectives? What kind of brand are we looking at? You know, we work with a wide portfolio of brands. So what are we trying to achieve and how we are going to achieve it? So that might be nano-influencers. It might be consumers as influencers, because we're very much of the mind that anyone has influence. If you have a voice, you have influence. So that's everything from traditional media to consumers. And finding that right mix. Sometimes it might mean that it necessitates having a celebrity, because sometimes celebrities will get other influencers and other celebrities to an event. But if you're just focusing on getting a mass quantity of content, maybe getting a promotional code out there for a retail event, you might be able to go the more nano-influencer route. But if anyone, after the session, go look at, there's a really great article on Business of Fashion that came out a couple weeks ago. At the end of the day, with nano-influencers, you're not going to be able to drive the amount of engagement that you would be able to with larger influencers.
Yeah.
So I'll have a counterpoint to that, which is organically, you can stack your nano-influencers on top of one another. You're still not going to be able to achieve the scale. But if you take the best performing nanos and put them head-to-head in a paid environment against a macro or celebrity influencer, we find that we see much less drop-off with that nano content, because the content itself was created more credibly and not with so much money up front.
Yeah. I think I saw an article the other day that almost influencers are like looking to reduce the quality, not overproduce some of their content. And I wonder if that has to do...
We get briefs like that. We don't want it too polished. We want it to feel like it fits in their feed, of course.
Yeah, and when you ask for high quality, that really begs the question, what is high quality these days, I guess, you know?
And then you're having the conversation whether you're casting a super influencer, a celebrity influencer, or whether you're actually trying to have a credible conversation through the lens of an influencer who's built an audience for the right reasons.
Sure. What do you guys think the role of the going from nano and micro up to mega and macro, however we want to define them? Is there going to be a point where just that upper echelon, it's just saturated? Is there going to be a point where this isn't worth it? And are we going to double, again, the theme of this weekend, or this week, is stories. How can we make sure that, at that upper level, if we do need to make that big splash and hit on these business objectives to get those numbers, for those really big folks, are we just going to eventually maybe want to only pepper them when really appropriate? Or are we going to, continue to double down on finding the right storytellers? How do they fit into this whole entire ecosystem?
I can take this one. So I think what we're seeing, if you look at the traditional model with celebrities, they had something outside of what they were doing when they were endorsing a product. They were making movies, they were making television shows, whatever it was that was engaging the audience. What we're seeing now at kind of the upper reach levels when it's a professional influencer, the level of sponsored content versus editorial or other things going on in their lives is now at this almost 90-10, where it really should be more like 30-70 in order to still be authentic. So I think part of it is that they are now a pure play advertising channel versus either treating them like media or treating them like celebrities. So I think it's more up to some of the top tier professional influencers to find things outside of being an influencer to continue to engage their audience.
And to build on that point, it also becomes difficult for marketers as influencers grow and grow and grow, and they see the opportunities in building their own brands. That becomes more difficult. Like, for instance, Ariel Sharness for Something Navy. You still see her working with other fashion brands, and it's very interesting because consumers are okay with that, but it's still an interesting territory that's uncharted, and people like her are really paving the way. In the beauty space, it's a little bit more expected. People are, developing their own palettes in conjunction with brands and still working with other beauty brands, but I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to who tells a powerful story, and synonymous stories is really, I think, where that happens the most. Obviously YouTube as well, because that's a great storytelling medium, but Instagram stories is really where it's at, where I think that influencers really build trust because they are talking face-to-face. I don't personally want to work with any influencers who aren't regularly face-to-face with their audiences, talking about their daily lives, because that's how you want to buy something from someone, because you feel like you're their friend.
Yeah, and I really love that direct connectedness that you're talking about. And one of the stats that we brought up, I think it was 28% of our professional influencers have blogs, which I'm like, blogging's been around, like, way to go blogging, you know, and they're creating these stories, really not intense, that's the wrong word, advanced stories where there's no, video is king, but again, you know, editorial has its place. Are you guys still looking, so stories and that FaceTime is definitely a thing? Where does editorial fit into your ecosystem or into your plans? I think, again, we think that, you know, stories are sexy, Instagram content flourishes, video is everywhere, and it's also where the kids are. Where does editorial live in your plans?
So when we're trying to drive performance in like a branded world, it's very hard to measure the long-term effect of that editorial content on a campaign. So we're not going to overpay for it, but certainly knowing that we've got that an influencer has that outlet where they can do long-form storytelling in a way that lives for a much longer period of time, and we can come back to it, means that we can have a relationship with them. We can have a much closer and intimate conversation about how they feel about our clients' products and services, so that if we go into a longer-term deal, as you were talking about in the setup, Danny, then all of a sudden we can have access to assets and audiences that you just don't get from an Instagram story.
For us, it's always a value add. You know, we constantly, as marketers, are stuck into a place of what we know really works and is really great and valuable, but like what looks great in a PowerPoint presentation. And so I think it's a delicate balance. It's always nice because it, again, builds credibility. It shows that they've had an audience. It also depends who you're trying to reach. If you're trying to reach Gen Z, probably not the way to go. But especially for older women, they still do read blogs. You know, there's not Google Reader anymore, but they don't have a blog roll to read, but often they're being directed there from an Instagram story swipe up to continue the conversation, to see more outfit photos, to read more about what they really think about those products outside of the Instagram stories. But a blogging area that I'm really interested in is microblogging. So everyone thinks of Twitter as the original microblogging platform, and what we're seeing more and more is influencers aren't keeping themselves to very short, quippy captions. They're okay with telling a more detailed story, talking about the breakdown of the products that they've used, why they love the products, and people are reading those captions, and then they're responding to them in comments. So they're really starting those conversations, and so there's a value in microblogging as well. It's just, it's the same content, it's in a different medium.
Yeah, I love that. You really need to go to where your audience is and ask influencers to do what they do. You know, I remember thinking that when I was at the agency, we always said if I had an influencer that did all stuff and they had a blog, but I'm like, why are we looking for a blog if they're doing this microblogging or things like that? We need to ask our influencers to really do what they do and what they love, and we'll find the best results. And to that point, one of the things that I thought was interesting in the survey that we did is that 10% of the influencers wrote in other. You know, finding, you know, we gave them the 14 categories to dive into. That wasn't enough, they wrote it in. How do you know when you guys have found the right influencer to tell the right stories? Just because I feel like if there's an interest, there is an influencer that talks about it, but there is this needle in the haystack component to finding the right people. So sure, stories first, but you guys have work to do. You need to hit timelines. You need to get budget approved and things like that. So how do you balance, you know, getting those really good stories with actually finding the right influencers?
I can take.
Sure.
So we work a lot on, you know, discoverability and how do we actually find some of those niche areas. I mean, outside of getting some of the, you know, general topics in, then it really does come down to what do the platforms, you know, give you access to, which in most cases there isn't that much out there. So we've really started to, you know, just have the people we're working with, give them surveys every now and then, actually talk to them about deeper interests, because a lot of the things that we work on might be, you know, almost like 5 levels deep within the niche of, let's say, health or something. And the only way you're really going to discover that is by talking to the influencers or talking to, if it's a talent agency that has a particular niche, like understanding who amongst their, you know, cast of influencers might be interested in this topic. So a lot of it does become manual, but then it's about being able to track it over time once they're now part of our ecosystem.
Right, and obviously there's tools like Julius,
There we
that's
go.
why we're here. So that definitely really helps. And for us in making the case to our brands that we work with, usually that's a great way to solidify it. It's like, you don't have to just believe us. There's data also to support it, but it's also, it's talking to the influencers. It's, surprise, surprise, being their friend. I know that's a novel concept to be a friend of someone that you work with, but it's really talking to them. And something that I'm always most interested in is those influencers who fit a niche, but they are so much more than that. So one of my favorite influencers to follow is Heather McMahon. She's an actress, comedian. And you wouldn't maybe think of her as a beauty influencer or a health wellness influencer, but she makes CBD drops fly off the shelves because she's built the trust with her audience that anything that she says, she really means and believes in. And so it's always it's a delicate balance of, you know, knowing people personally, asking them questions, using tools to then support what your findings are, however possible. And then asking influencers. The best way that you can make the case is showing screenshots of an influencer's DMs that they've gotten from people that follow them, asking them questions. Because a like is a like at the end of the day. But if someone's gonna take the time to DM someone that they follow to find out more, what better value that you have than that to show that you've created a really meaningful touch point with your brand?
Yeah. That's a good point. I like that.
Hey, that's why I'm here.
Want to shift gears a little bit and talk about platform stuff. What are you guys excited about? We've been hearing, I mean, Facebook dating is now a thing, or will be a thing. What are the platforms and features and functions that you're excited to bring into your influencer ecosystem? Things are changing all the time. Even if it's not so new, what do you want to test out in the next 6 to 12 months or so?
Shoppable Instagram. I mean, it's what all our clients are asking for. It's like the holy grail. Can we directly move products without taking people out of their experience? So as we get a chance to test it, we get to figure out what kind of content works, what the frequency is. It's not going to be just one post and one and done. It's going to be a series of conversations with audiences.
About that, do you think that there's almost going to be, is your compensation structure going to be different for your influencers, their ability to drive sales and reward them for almost like an affiliate program? Is that how it's going to work?
We already do stuff like that. I mean, we're already trying to incentivize our influencer partners and our clients to think about what they want to have happen on the platform. So yeah, for sure.
Very cool.
I definitely think it'll change, you know, with getting brands to more of that affiliate space, because usually, you know, you think of big corporate brands, those sit in silos, those roles sit in silos. Affiliate usually is in the heavily digital side, and influencers is usually in the heavily marketing side. And that's pretty common. And so I think it'll take a lot of mind shifts of people on the brand side and agencies. It's the onus is on us to help to educate. I definitely think that for the TikTok space is absolutely fascinating.
Unbelievable what's happening on TikTok.
Right, and Byte now, the reboot of Vine is in beta, so we'll have to watch that space very closely. It's a little bit easier when it comes to fashion as a medium and as a discipline, because if you're wearing an outfit, you have to be wearing an outfit. Hopefully you're wearing an outfit if you're in video, but it's easier to communicate. But then when you're talking about short form video, it's harder to communicate things that you have to talk about product benefits. So definitely an interesting space, but also Facebook groups. Consumers as influencers, I can't tell you how many Facebook groups that I am in, and I see product flying off the shelves. People saying, what do you use for this? Oh, this, and this. Immediately buying it, immediately buying it. So these are really passionate consumer bases that brands have to find a way to tap into in a meaningful way. And at the end of the day, too, a lot of those things are very hard to measure. So we as marketers have to build strategies that create measurable vehicles that we can prove our success.
Are you guys, about short form video, I think out of a lot of the streaming platforms and the ability for users to create videos, Instagram TV has really evolved itself and added a lot of features that just make it so much easier. Are you guys integrating IGTV at all? Is that something you guys are playing around with? And if so, do you have any good examples of that? I'm personally curious. So. And if not, that's okay.
We are, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. It's kind of, we were just talking actually backstage about Facebook and, you know, when they kind of semi-artificially inflated video view counts. We saw that a little bit with Instagram TV as well. People who were early adopters on the platform, they were getting millions and millions and millions of views, and it was very tough to discern why, and they might not have even had millions and millions of followers to begin with. So I think it's an interesting space, and we as marketers have to be very careful in delving into those mediums, but then also being very clear and concentrated when it's coming to adding them into contracts.
Sure.
So maybe we're not paying a premium for IGTV, but it's a nice value add.
Sure. I want to shift for the last couple minutes that we have here. I want to talk about professional influencers. Not necessarily in size, but in terms of complexity of deliverables, and frankly, dealing with agents and managers, which can be both fruitful but also a huge headache. So want to know what your expertise is with working with managers. Is it making things easier? Is it a harder barrier? Is it more expensive? What's kind of your take on working with maybe not the creators themselves, but a person who represents them and also wants to get a cut?
It certainly does drive up the price a little bit, but we can also expect more professionalism. We do a lot of whitelisting of our talent, and there's a moment where you're talking with an influencer where they go, I'm not sure I want to give you access to my business manager, Facebook Business Manager. And working with that's all on the table when you go through a manager and agent. Our experience has been we get a lot better results, and we get make goods and we get better review processes with a manager. However, I like the idea of a professional class of independent operators who get to make a living on the platforms of their choice without having another layer of middlemen taking a cut. I know that sounds a little Bernie-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also, yes, logistics, it becomes a lot easier when there's, managers and agencies running the influencer relationships. It's sometimes, though, there's a few things that happen, and I do like the idea of the independent that you can have a real honest conversation with about maybe how something performed or a change you want to make or some type of value add. It becomes harder and harder the more layers that are involved. And also when we're talking about big Fortune 500 companies that might have 19 people touching influencer, and 5 of them want to work with this one influencer and they don't even all know, they're going to that agency that's then bidding them up against each other. So there's some positives, there's some negatives, but it's all, a refinement right now.
Totally agree. And, for us too, it comes to the point where you have to make sure that you still value building the direct relationship with that influencer. So if they have a manager and an agent, definitely build a relationship with them as well, because they're valuable people as well. But when you're on the ground, say at an interactive event or a content capture experience, you're working directly with that influencer, and you're having to make sure that they're delivering on their deliverables, and you're responsible for reviewing their copy and content, and their manager and agent is nowhere to be found. So at the end of the day, if you don't have that relationship with the influencer directly and they don't trust you, then you're not doing yourself any favors. Yeah.
Well, guys, we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you all for attending this panel. Again, we have the report at the booth. I would love to continue discussing all this stuff with you. Check us out, Julius Influencer Marketing, and we'll catch you around the conference. Thanks.